Hey folks, I'm Jack Fossett, and we're going to talk about neck tones today and what are your favorite neck tones. Going to take 8 different guitars and put them back to back and play some clean and some overdriven to really hear the contrast between neck tones on what I hope is a good representation of a bunch of different types of guitars and a bunch of different types of pickups, and talk a little bit about what their unique character is, what kind of situations they're suited for, give some recommendations of some great songs that you can hear good examples of these tones in. So let's dive right in with a clean comparison here, going back to back with these 8 different guitars. Then we're going to get into some more nitty-gritty, talk a little bit about their character more individually, hear some longer samples and things. If you like what I'm doing on the channel, follow the links below, download some music, buy a CD. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy. So we are going to start with one of the most classic guitars ever, and specifically with its neck tone, the Fender Stratocaster. Absolutely known for one of the best neck tones ever. It's clear, it cuts, but it's very bell-like, and it actually has a really wide kind of frequency response. It has really great bass and it has really great treble, but the bass stays kind of nice and tight and doesn't get boomy, and the treble doesn't get too sharp, but it does kind of just sail right through the mix, and it just has this cool, almost vocal-like character to it, which is really awesome. Great example of Stratocaster neck pickup tone. Look up David Gilmour live at Gdansk and listen to Echoes, and it will blow your mind. Also, folks, I'm going to share some of my favorites, what I think are great examples. Please feel free to let us know in the comments what are some songs that you know and love that have good examples of any of these guitars and their pickup tones. Feel free to leave that down in the comments. Here's some playing on the Stratocaster neck pickup. For this next section on all these guitars, I'm going to be using a Wampler Tumnus. Today we're playing into the Franklin Amps 5E3. I'm also using a one-control Prussian Blue reverb to add a little bit of air. At the end of the video, we're going to do a back-to-back comparison, doing it dirty like we did at the beginning, but with a different flavor of overdrive, and for that I'm going to use the Wampler Pantheon. For now, we're going to play some longer samples here. Here's the Stratocaster neck pickup with a little bit of overdrive on it. For another classic guitar, let's go to the Gibson Les Paul, and this is going to be a great example of a humbucking PAF style neck tone. Now, one of the big complaints that I hear a lot from people with Gibson guitars is that the neck can be too muddy. Well, if you have a nice set of PAF inspired pickups with proper wiring, that's really not going to be the case. And if you dial your amp in appropriately, and if you set the pickup a little bit lower, Les Paul neck tones can be really amazing if you know what you're doing with them and you know what to expect with them. And it's not going to quite be that same kind of cutting cool Fender tone, but it kind of sits almost between a Fender and like an ES style guitar. It doesn't quite have the warmth of the ES style guitar. It still has that sort of cool, almost throaty, but a little bit more compressed with a fatter mid-range than a Fender, a little bit less attack, but it still has a nice clear top end. Les Paul neck tones, I think, are actually kind of underrated in a way. I think, again, a lot of people complain that they're muddy, but they can just get these really cool tones that a lot of other guitars can't. There's one guitar player who's done a lot with Les Paul neck tones that will actually surprise you, and that's Mark Knopfler. And so I'm going to give you a couple examples here. One is one of the most famous songs from one of the best-selling albums ever, which is Brothers in Arms. If you want a great Les Paul neck tones, listen to Brothers in Arms. Also, later from his solo career, listen to Song for Sonny Liston. Really, really awesome bluesy neck tone from his, I believe, 1958 Les Paul. Lastly, if you want a Clapton reference, because I love Clapton so much, great Les Paul neck tone that he then kicks to the bridge at the very end, but a really cool solo and a really great example of the woman tone that he used in Cream on a song called I Feel Free. By the way, folks, if you want to know what all these guitars are specifically more than just, Gibson Les Paul, Fender Stratocaster, I'm going to put all that information down in the description. So here's some kind of bluesy grit coming from the Les Paul neck tone. Okay, back with Fender here, and we have the Fender Telecaster. Now, I've done a whole video on Fender Telecaster neck tone, and it actually got quite an interest. And one of the things is I kind of describe it as the magic Tele neck tone, which is unique and it's different, and not all Teles have it. Some Telecaster neck pickups, on the good, if they don't have this magic tone that I'm talking about, on the good side, they'll just sound like a good Strat pickup. On the not as good side, they'll just sound like generic single coil, almost like a split humbucker, just kind of nothing to them. A really good Telecaster neck tone has an airy quality to it. It has a woodiness. It has this nice attack and this nice snap that sits on top of this kind of hollow mid-range, and then has bass it's not muddy or flubby, but it's not necessarily super tight either. And this sounds really crazy, but it's the best way I can describe this tone is it sounds like Carl Wilson's voice from the Beach Boys. That's what it sounds like. This guitar, I think, really nails that tone. I love this guitar. It's got a great Tele neck tone. I think this kind of unique, airy, woody, hollow tone is part of the reasons why Telecasters are also great for jazz. And so, for an example of this tone, listen to Bill Frisell playing Surfer Girl. It's one of the most beautiful performances and arrangements of one of the best songs pretty much ever written, and with an incredible tone, great musicianship. That's a really good example. In fact, a lot of Bill Frisell is a good example, but that's the one that just kind of comes to mind. Now here's a little bit of a dirtier tone using the Tele neck pickup. Next, we have the Gibson ES-345. Now, you might say, okay, 345, why'd you pick that instead of a 335? Couple reasons. Number one, because this one is such a stunning color, and I love this guitar, and it's a little bit different. Number two, they're really pretty much the same. This is kind of my offering for a Gibson ES style guitar that's a semi-hollow. This is going to be very similar to the Les Paul. However, it has more warmth. As I mentioned, the Les Paul doesn't quite have the warmth that the ES series has. The tone is very similar, but it has much more of a warmth to it. And this is just a really, really beautiful tone. It has kind of a, almost like a buttery rich quality to it. Best example, I think, ever of a great neck tone from a Gibson ES guitar is BB King. Here is some with this. You'll hear it doesn't quite break up as much as some of the other guitars. The pickups aren't quite as aggressive, but it has a beautiful warmth to it, still using the Wampler tumness. Check this out. Now we're getting to some different guitars here, and when I say different, I mean, it's just kind of a little bit more off the beaten path. This is certainly still a well-known guitar. This is a Gretsch 6120. Now, this is a fully hollow guitar. It has the Filtertron pickups in it and everything, which have their own unique sound. You can crudely describe them as being between a single coil and a humbucker tonally. They are humbucking pickups, but they have much more twang and growl and throatiness like a single coil would, but they still have a nice warmth and body like a humbucker would. They're really extremely underrated pickups, and these are really, in my opinion, very underplayed and underrated guitars. This guitar is just amazing, and the neck tone it just gives you everything you want. This is actually one of the best recording guitars I've ever owned, because you plug it in, you play, and you record it, and it just sounds like you want it to sound. It's just a fantastic guitar. If you want to hear this guitar on some studio recordings, click the link right there. You can hear this very guitar with a super reverb on a studio recording. I love this guitar, and I use this to record with a lot. If you want a great example of a Gretsch neck tone, check out Brian Setzer, My Baby Don't Love Me Blues. Now here's this guitar with Wampler tumness, giving it a little bit of grit. Here's the next guitar. This is a totally different offering from Gibson. Now, this is a Gibson Firebird. The neck through, it's a reverse Firebird like the originals would have been. This guitar is stunning. It's amazing. It's an underrated guitar. It's an underappreciated guitar. I love this guitar, and it has a very unique neck tone. This is another one that you could say very much sits in between that Fender and Gibson sound, even though it's a Gibson, and that's particularly true on the neck pickup. Now, I've done a whole video on the Firebird and how I think the Firebird is kind of a misunderstood creature. A lot of people want to call it a Strat on steroids, which I don't think is true. I think it's overall tonally more akin to somewhere in the Telecaster Les Paul realm. Kind of being, it's almost like a Telecaster and a Les Paul are playing tug of war, but then the Stratocaster swoops in at the last second and grabs the neck pickup. That's kind of my take on a Gibson Firebird. The neck pickup is very, very Strat on steroids like. Overall, the guitar is more like I said, kind of some sort of struggle between a Les Paul and a Telecaster. But the neck pickup is very Strat-like, and it can be very Strat-like in a lot of ways. Again, just a great guitar, a very underrated tone. Now, these mini humbuckers that are in Firebirds are different than other mini humbuckers, and that's important to mention. For instance, one of my other favorite neck tones ever is a Gibson Les Paul Deluxe, which has the standard mini humbuckers that came from Epiphones. A whole long story. These are the Firebird pickups were kind of their own unique beast. If you want a great example of a Gibson Firebird neck tone, you should check out a song called Savannah Morning. I heard there's a really, really good Firebird neck solo in that song. In the meantime, here's this guitar playing with a little bit of grit. For my P90 selection today, another absolute classic is the Epiphone Casino. Now, this is a guitar that has its own wildly unique demographic when it comes to the guitar world, partially in part because these were so popular with the British invasion and specifically with the Beatles and everything. Now, what's interesting about this is a good example also of how you can't kind of judge a pickup by its cover. You'll notice, at least to my ear, in comparing these guitars, this is a P90, right? It's single coil, but it's probably one of the fattest, warmest sounding guitars in the whole bunch. Fully hollow, it's got the big dog ear P90 with the metal cover that's pretty close to the strings. It's just a big, warm, fat guitar. They're great for jazz. They're great for blues. They're great for British invasion. It's a really nice guitar. It's got its own unique tone and, again, kind of its own unique demographic. And there is something that I just feel very at home with when it comes to Epiphone Casinos. Also, pretty much the same guitar as a Gibson ES-330. For an excellent example of an Epiphone Casino neck tone, listen to Gary Clark Jr. covering B.B. King's classic 3 O'Clock Blues. Here's the Epiphone Casino for some great gritty neck tones. Last but certainly not least, we have kind of the wild card of the bunch, and that is the PRS. This is a PRS CE24 semi-hollow. Now, this has humbucking pickups, but it has coil splitting. And I mentioned with the Telecaster that, I kind of poo-pooed a little bit the tone of a split humbucker and the single coil. PRS is pretty much the only company that I would trust for coil splitting. A lot of coil splitting guitars just, it's like, oh, listen, my humbucker sounds weak and noisy now. That's great. But PRS actually gets it. They do it right. And I don't know the ins and outs of it technically, because that's not really, I'm not a luthier, but they know what they're doing when it comes to coil splitting. So this is an offering for showing coil splitting, but also PRS guitars get a very unique tone. It would be a mistake to think that this is trying to pack a Gibson and a Fender into one, which is kind of what I think a lot of people think PRS guitars are. They're not. They have their own sound. And one of the things that has struck me about the PRS sound is that it has an acoustic quality to it, which is kind of hard to describe, but it has this top end clarity and almost like a slight compression of like the sound of your fingers hitting the strings. Somehow that comes through the pickup more so than any other guitar that I've heard. Now, this one being a 24 fret guitar, also the pickup's a little bit further this way, which makes a difference in the tone. It's a snappier neck tone, and with that kind of acoustic clarity on top. These are really, really great for overdrive because they retain an incredible articulation even as you add gain, that with some other pickups, they just kind of like just start to squish and get muddy and things. This one stays very, very clear even as you add in some overdrive. Still sounds great clean. For a great example of a PRS neck tone, not a CE24, but look up Simon McBride playing Little Wing, which is, you just forget the tone. You won't regret it. It's pretty fantastic. I have no idea why he isn't a household name. He's one of the best guitar players I've ever heard. Check out Simon McBride playing Little Wing. Now here's some gritty neck tones, and again, I am going to do the coil splitting with this so that you can hear both tones using the PRS. So there are our tones for today, folks. Please remember to leave in the comments what are some other good examples of your favorite neck tones, whether or not they're from these guitars or from other guitars. Let us know what your favorite neck tones are, because there's a lot of other things out there that are, I didn't kind of try and jam pack into this video. There are more standard P90 neck tones like an SG or a Les Paul with a P90 or a Telecaster with a P90 in the neck position. There's the Jazzmaster, which has its own kind of crazy unique neck pickup. I mentioned the Les Paul Deluxe, which is a mini humbucker sound, but a different kind of mini humbucker sound. You can get Gretches with Dynasonics. It's just a ridiculous number of different cool neck tones out there. So let us know in the comments, what are your favorite neck tones? What were your favorite out of these? What are some great song examples of neck tones that you love? We're going to do one more back-to-back comparison, kind of like the beginning, but going to do it overdriven with the Wampler Pantheon. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Follow the links below where you can download some music or buy a CD if you like. I'm Jack Fossett. Hope you enjoy the rest of the video, and we'll see you next time.